I'm Brandi Kruse, and this is a bonus episode of Undivided. Undivided is brought to you by 1530 Mortgage. Visit them at 1530mortgage.com. Today, a deep dive into a deep snow saga that is a prime example of government gaslighting. I'm Brandi Kruse. Welcome to this bonus edition of Undivided. A fight between the state and one Washington county over snow removal is perfectly suited for a segment that we call Unbelievable. By now, I'm sure you've heard about this ridiculous story out of Kittitas County, Washington, which was buried in a few feet of snow earlier this month and had some trouble digging out. First, let's set this up with a fact. Due to Governor Jay Inslee's vaccine mandate, the state fired 151 workers who would have otherwise been directly involved in snow removal operations across the state this winter. However, if you ask State Transportation Secretary Roger Millar,
we didn't fire anybody. The requirements changed and people elected not to meet their requirements of staying employed at the agency. It's a nuance, and we may disagree on that, but that no one was
yes,
fired.
we do. We disagree on that.
Okay.
Now, I play that to help you appreciate the level of gaslighting that Roger Millar has engaged in order to help you better understand this drama in Kittitas County. On January 11th, Kittitas County's Public Works Department says it offered to help the state clear State Route 903, but the state declined. When did you guys realize that they were not going to accept your offer of assistance?
Right after we called and offered to help.
What'd they say?
If you're not vaccinated, you can't work for us.
You see, the state's vaccine mandate prohibits it from contracting with anyone, public entity or not, if that entity cannot prove the vaccination status of its employees. Kittitas County does not have a vaccine mandate. Understandably, Kittitas County thought this was absolutely absurd given the extent of the weather emergency.
The risk to the public by not allowing this is much greater than the risk of somebody that may not be vaccinated sitting by themselves in a cab.
Now, the moment that Kittitas County dared to make its frustrations over all of this public, the Washington State Department of Transportation started a campaign to discredit them. Secretary Millar told the Senate Transportation Committee that the county didn't really care about clearing the roads of snow. They cared about the $40,000 they'd get for doing it.
Their concern was, why are you hiring a contractor to do that work? We could do it.
Millar also suggested that the county's offer of assistance came too late and that most major roadways were already cleared.
It's important to note that Snoqualmie Pass opened on Sunday. They approached us on Tuesday.
But of course, it wasn't the passes the county was offering to help with. It was State Route 903, which is in Kittitas County and which intersects with all sorts of county roads. So why would Roger Millar go to these lengths to gaslight the public into thinking that Kittitas County is the bad guy in all of this? Well, the reason is simple. He did it to distract from the one thing about this entire story that actually matters. And that is that the state refuses to allow people to help plow snow if they don't have a COVID vaccine. And why would Roger Millar want to distract from that? Well, it's because he knows damn well that it doesn't make sense. But he can't say that because he works at the pleasure of Governor Jay Inslee. Part of returning rational thought to our broader handling of the pandemic, I believe, is emergency power reform. Emergency power reform isn't about taking power out of the hands of one person. It's about requiring that person to provide reasonable justifications for what he's doing. But let me be clear. No lawmaker should want to reform our laws around emergency powers just because of Jay Inslee or the pandemic. You don't fix a law for the moment. You fix a law because it's broken. And the pandemic has helped us realize that the law is broken. That's why so few states give a governor such unchecked power during an emergency. You know, I couldn't help but notice during his State of the State address, which was, I believe, his 10th State of the State address, that Governor Inslee used one word over and over.
We must take action this day.
85 times, the governor used the word we. Now, usually that would be a good thing. It's better than saying I, or saying something like this.
There's only one person in the state of Washington who has the capability to save those lives right now, and it happens to be the governor of the state of Washington.
But I can't can't help but wonder, who is this we that the governor's talking about?
We must take action this day.
For the better part of 2 years, the governor has all but cut the legislature out of decision-making as it pertains to the pandemic. Some might argue that's a good thing, that politics and partisanship shouldn't get in the way of our emergency response. And look, that's a fine argument to make for a few months. But nearly 2 years down the road, we are still using a one-size-fits-all solution for an emergency that demands nuance. A solution that put dedicated law enforcement officers out of work during a time of rising crime, only to realize that vaccinated officers are still spreading the virus. A solution that leaves ferry passengers stranded in downtown Seattle at night because staffing shortages have been made worse by vaccine mandates. A solution that prevents someone from driving a plow truck alone to help dig their community out of snow. To Democrats in Olympia, I beg you to see these things clearly, to admit that we have to apply reason and common sense to our approach at this stage in the pandemic, and to think enough of yourselves and your constituents to want to be a part of that. Democrats are the only ones who are able to pass emergency power reform. And until they do, they share the blame of any unintended consequences from Governor Inslee's actions. Thank you so much for joining me on this special episode of Undivided. If you haven't become a subscriber already, you can do so at patreon.com/undivided or by becoming a contributor on my locals community, brandikruse.locals.com. Also, make sure to check out the Undivided podcast wherever you get your podcasts. A new episode comes out every Monday and Friday. Undivided is brought to you by 1530 Mortgage. Visit them at 1530mortgage.com.